Module 2.2. We're going to be talking about what we mean by entity type, entity instance, entity class, attribute, value, domain, and relationship. Okay. So we've said before that entities are made up of collections of attributes, but there's a little bit more nuance to this, right? Our entities or our entity types are conceptual representations of some, object of interest, this observable or unobservable reality, right? That's what our entity types are. An instance is a single occurrence of an entity type. So if we have an entity type of student that's made up of these attributes like PeopleSoft ID and first name, last name, email address, and phone number, each one of you individually are an instance of that student entity, okay? Entity class is kind of a higher level object, right? So student might be of an entity class person, right? Because all students are people, and you as a student share a lot of attributes with employees and faculty member and staff and things like that. You have some different attributes, but at a higher level, you are a person, just like they are, right? Attributes are the things that together describe an entity. A value is a data point that is a value of an attribute for a specific instance. Domain is going to be a possible set of values for an attribute, and a relationship is how entities are associated with other entities. Okay, so this is just a real quick synopsis of these definitions, but of course we're going to be digging more and more into these throughout this section. So let me start by asking you guys, what is this? I'm sure you guys know what this is.
That is a horse.
A horse. An actual horse?
A model.
A model. Ah, yes, it's a model. A model of a horse. This is a simplified representation of a horse, right? It is an imperfect representation of a horse, right? In what ways is this imperfect? How is this different from an actual horse?
The size of it.
The size of it, right? I certainly couldn't hold a real horse like this in my hand.
The material it's made of is not made of like fur and actual biological stuff.
Yeah, there's no fur or flesh. I don't know if you can hear that, but it's hard plastic, no fur, no flesh. It doesn't move around. It's not warm to the touch, right? It actually smells a lot better than I think a real horse does. Right? So it's a model of a horse. But, this actually could be pretty useful if you think about if I had a friend that had never seen a horse, right? Or was just unfamiliar with animals altogether, and I was trying to explain to them what a horse is. And it's like got a big body and these long legs and a kind of long neck and pointy face. And then we go to a farm or whatever, and we're looking around at the animals. Well, he very well might see a dog run by and go, oh, that must be a horse. It's got the body and the long legs and the pointy nose. Or he might see a goat, or we might see a giraffe and think that this is a horse, right? But if I showed him this model and said, this is what a horse looks like, right? These are the proportions. This is actually pretty useful for being able to describe to someone what this animal is, right? So, in some ways, this could be even more useful than having an actual horse, right? Because I can hold this. I can describe this sitting in my room or sitting on a Zoom meeting. I couldn't hold up this horse and describe it if it was real, right? So in some ways, this is even more useful than a real horse. So what we're going to do here is take this physical model of a horse and create a data model we can use to represent it. And I think I'm going to need both hands in order to do this. So I wonder if I can, let's give this a try. Oh, yeah, there we go. So we're going to get this right around here and, perfect. Here is our horse, and this horse is named Sam. Okay, my horse Sam. And what are some attributes that we might be interested in knowing about Sam?
Color.
Color?
Male.
I'm going to suggest maybe let's start with name, right? Because name is, her name is Sam. So name is good. Color is good. What else might we want to know about our horse here?
The breed.
Breed is a good one.
Gender.
Gender. I like gender. Okay, let me.
Age.
I'm gonna say sex because I don't know. I can determine biological sex. I'm not sure how our horse identifies. So name, color. I'm gonna suggest that we might also want to know whether our horse has spots. Okay, so just bear with me there. Name, color, spots, sex. What else?
Weight.
Weight? I like weight. Okay, good.
Height.
Height? Yeah, don't you measure horses in hands, I think? All right, I think we have enough attributes here to kind of go with. So name, color, spots, sex, and weight. As I mentioned, this horse, I know this horse is named Sam. Sam is brown. Does Sam appear to have any spots?
No.
No.
Sam does not have spots. Sam, I know, is female. Actually stands for Samantha, and Samantha weighs 1,500 pounds. Okay, so of course, Sam is not the only horse that we have. Sam has some friends. So this particular friend here is what color?
Tan?
Tan, yellow. I'll go with yellow. I heard yellow first. Does this yellow horse have spots?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. And be thinking about a name, guys, because we got to figure out how we determine the sex of this horse. And I was very unsure of this. And we actually visited a farm over the summer, and I was asking, how do you determine the sex of a horse? And the farmer person was like, well, there's really only one sure way. You just kind of got to, look under here. And it's just printed right there. The sex and the weight of the horse is right there on the bottom. It's very, very handy. So that's a nice thing to have. So this is a yellow spotted female horse that weighs 920 pounds. So what is our yellow spotted female horse's name?
Janet.
Janet? I like it. We got Janet. Janet in the house. All right. We have another horse, this lovely gray color. Does our gray horse have spots?
No.
No.
Okay, no spots. Let's see. This is a 1,800-pound male. So let's see. Male. We're going to say 1,800. And what is this horse's name?
Mark.
Mark? Oh,
Yeah.
I'm honored. The horse named after me.
No, Mark.
Yeah.
MATT.
Matt? Okay. Well, that's okay too. Not as good a name as Mark, but it'll suffice. Okay. Next up, we have this horse, and this actually looks kind of black on my screen, but you have to trust me when I say this horse is actually brown. Okay, so we have a brown horse. Does this brown horse have spots?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, a spotted horse that is male and 1,300 pounds. So male, 1,300. And this horse's name is
Dave.
Dave. Dave the horse. All right. We got a couple of more horse friends here. We have another gray horse with no spots, right? And this is a female horse. Oops. Female horse that is 1,700 pounds. And her name, of course, is
Bridget.
Bridget. All right. And Bridget has 3 more friends here, one of which is this delightful yellow no-spotted horse, which is a male horse that is 1,100 pounds. And his name is
Ed.
Ed? Mr. Ed.
Mr.
Excellent.
Ed, there you go.
Mr. Ed. Oh yeah, I guess we do need the proper salutation here, right? Mr. Ed. Fantastic. Okay, this is, again, I promise you, a brown horse, not a black horse, but we have brown, we have no spots. This horse is female and is 1,200 pounds, and her name is
Meg.
Stallion.
Meg S. All right. And then last but not least, another brown horse. I'm kind of bored because we already have 3 brown horses. This is a very rich color brown. I'm going to suggest we say this horse is espresso. Hey, espresso. Mahogany, cocoa, something like that. This is a very fancy looking horse to me. Does this espresso colored horse have spots?
No.
No spots. And this is a male of 1,750 pounds. And of course, his name is
Robert.
Robert, the espresso horse. Excellent. All right, so we have developed our data model to describe all of the horses that we have at our horse sanctuary or stable, horse store, whatever it is we have here. And the first thing we have here, horses, is our entity type, right? And this is the equivalent of a table in your database. So we'll call this an entity or an entity type. Sometimes we'll call it a relation a little later in the semester. We'll call it a table a little later in the semester. So horses is our entity type. And horses are made up of these 5 attributes: a name, color, whether they have spots or not, their sex, and their weight. And then we have entity instances, right? And so we have a collection of values of each of the attribute that makes up an instance, okay? So each one of these entity instances represents an individual horse, right? So, this is, let's see, so here's Dave, right? This instance represents this individual horse, right? This horse is represented by this individual instance, and so forth. So each instance is a single, representation of our entity type. Then we have all of these values that are a specific value of the attribute for each instance. And then some things that we can't really see here are our entity class of animal, right? So this is just going kind of up a level of abstraction. And if you think about it, all of these same attributes could be used to describe other animals, like dogs or cats or whatever, right? So there is a kind of higher level abstraction here that we could apply this model or a similar model to. And then relationships, also not shown here, but we probably have some other entity types, right? Like owners that own these horses, or stables that the horses are assigned to, or something like that. So we have relationships. And then the final thing that we need to talk about are the domains of the attributes. Okay, so the domain describes all of the valid values of an attribute. Okay, so for something like name, we don't have a domain, right? We might have a domain that says whether or not it is required to have a value for name, but we don't have an explicit set of values that are valid for this attribute. For some of our other attributes, like spots, well, we're going to say that the domain of values for spots is either yes or no. Okay, there are no other valid values for spots. We're not going to say maybe they have spots or lots of spots or few spots. Like, we either want a value of yes or no. So that's our domain for spots. We might also say we have a domain for sex of either female or male, right? And we're not going to allow any other, unspecified or non-binary or anything like that. And we might in the future change our business rules, right? Which is going to be fairly easy to do since we're defining these constraints in the database, right? This is just going to be making a slight change in the conceptual schema to allow other values in the future. If we had defined this data structure in the application layer, it's a much more in-depth process to allow different values to occur there, right? We also have, so these are explicit domains where we specify specific values. We also have implicit domains. So in this case, for weight, we have an implicit domain, and I just looked up on Wikipedia, what are the average weights of horses, and it said 800 to 2,200 pounds. That seems reasonable to me. So we're not specifying every specific possible weight, but just that the weight is going to be in this range between 800 and 2,200, right? And what this is going to do is make sure that we have valid values there, that we have good data, right? Because if there is no horse that's going to weigh 22,000 pounds, why would we ever want our database to allow someone to say their horse weighs 22,000 pounds, right? Because most likely that's a typo. Someone tried to put in, 2,200 pounds and accidentally hit the zero one too many times, right? So better for the database to throw an error message than to allow unreliable data to get in there. That's an issue around data integrity. But now a question for you. What about color? Should we define a domain for color? Should we say these are the 5 or 10 colors that a horse could be and you have to select from that? Or should we allow people to just specify any color they want, like espresso? What do we think?
It should be any color they want.
Any color they want? I think that's a reasonable approach. Let me throw a business case at you. So let's say we have our horse store here where people are coming to buy horses or whatever. And they say, I want to see all of your brown horses. Okay, I'm interested in brown horses only. So if we look this up in the database, we're going to find this horse, we're going to find this horse, and we're going to find this horse. But we're not going to find this horse that we've said is the color espresso, even though these horses are both really the same color. Like if you're interested in brown horses, you're probably interested in this brown one as well as this one that's the color espresso. So for some business cases, I'm going to suggest that maybe we do want to have a domain for an attribute like color, right? We're going to say, look, your horses can be black, white, yellow, brown, gray, and red, and that's it. So for some business cases, that totally makes sense. We should have a domain for color, right? In other business cases, let's say that you were running like a website or a blog, a discussion board where people are talking about their horses and they set up their profile describing all of their horses and their horses' names and hobbies and what color their horses are. And in that case, you might want people just to have all of the creative freedom and have as much fun with it as they want. And they can call their horse, brown or, mud or mahogany or espresso or whatever they want to call it, rainbow sparkle purple, right? Because it really doesn't matter if everyone has a different name for the same colors in a situation like that, right? So there's really not one right or wrong answer about should you have specified domains for different attributes, right? And if there's no right or wrong answer, how do we figure this out? What is the deciding factor as to if we should have a domain for an attribute like color?
Well, it seems like it would be a business relationship, but I'm wondering if you would want to maybe, I'm thinking you could go two ways with it. Maybe you could either say, you could define it in the application, or you could say, we're going to have two different fields, one for our artists who need to be creative, that's called art color, and one for our stables who need to, whatever the business case is, called stable color, and they're both optional. So only the stable app is accessing stable color. Would that be one way to look at it?
Yeah, sure. And in the case I was describing, I was actually thinking of two, totally separate applications and databases. But you make a couple of really great points here. One being that decision comes from our business rules, right? It comes from what the application really needs, what the business case is. And, as we are taking in these requirements and we explain this problem that might occur. Well, if you allow this and you want to search for brown horses, you're not going to find all your brown horses, right? We use our diagramming and our understanding of how this works to explain that back to the business person. And yeah, maybe a nice compromise would be to put a domain on color, but then an additional free text field where you could describe the color of your horses in any way that you want, right? So not one perfectly right or wrong answer, right? But a lot of different approaches that we could take based on the business rules and the business requirements. So that's our data model about horses.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah, absolutely.
So with a business rule, if you know that a business rule is possibly fluid, some rules are hard and fast and some rules, might change over time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does that change where you want to enforce that rule, whether you want it to be in your database or your application, or does it always need to be in your database?
I think you're almost always going to find that it's best to at least define that in your database. And you might want to do it in the application as well, but defining it in the database, it is going to be, generally speaking, easier to change if things come up in the future. And then also you kind of get that belt and suspenders approach of, well, what if another application down the line starts accessing this data? Well, we want to make sure all these business requirements and business rules are enforced, and the database is kind of the last line of defense in this case to make sure that happens. Good question. So as we're defining this model and this schema, what we're doing is building up our data dictionary. Okay, so the data dictionary describes our tables and what attributes or columns make up these tables, the data type for each of these attributes, and how much data we're going to allow to be stored in there, and then the relationships between all of these different tables. So this structure that we've created here is what's defined in the data dictionary, right? And that's what's stored in the DBMS. So now if we start thinking about other applications, aside from just managing our herd of horses, we might come up on something like an e-commerce situation where we have a website that is selling mice and monitors and everything else. And so what I want you guys to do now, we have a poll everywhere, our in-class exercise coming up. And take a look, and we'll spend just maybe 2 or 3 minutes. I'll be watching the results as they come in. And I want you guys to list 3 attributes that you see on this page. 3 attributes. And this is our in-class exercise for tonight. All right, so I saw a lot of really good answers come in. Things like brand. I saw a lot of brand, name, rating. I saw quite a few people send in. Description, or even certain pieces of the description, like wireless. Like, is it wireless or not? I could see that being an attribute, like a yes or a no, or a description of the wireless aspect of it. Price or original price, also 2 really good attributes. The brand, the product ID, images, right? Image 1, image 2, image 3. And there's a number of different ways we might actually store this in the database. So these are our attributes, right? And I didn't see many people making this mistake, but I do want to make sure it's really clear. All of the other things, like 835, that is a value of the attribute price. And Genius Traveler 6000Z is the value of the attribute name. Okay? And this is the value of the attribute category. Okay, so you have your attributes and then the values of those attributes for this particular instance of a product, right? So you have product that's made up of all of these attributes, and then each instance of the product, or each instance of product, has a different name and has a different price and a different original price and a different description, right? And so forth down the line. And so one thing that I do want to point out here is when we're thinking about how information systems work and how applications are developed, whoever's running this website, if this is Walmart or Amazon or whatever, the developers don't go and create an individual page for every single product that the company sells, right? They create a page, and this is simplifying it a little bit, but more or less that is a framework for what the product pages are going to look like, right? So you create this framework and you put a variable here that says, you know what, we're going to put here whatever the value of the category attribute is for the particular instance of a product that this customer is interested in, right? We put a placeholder here for the name and the price and the original price and the description, right? And then whatever product the customer is interested in, whatever instance of this product entity the customer pulls up, all of those values of the attributes that make up the product are going to be populated here, right? So we get a different name, different category, different pictures, different prices, things like that. So that's kind of how the world works as far as that goes. So we've talked about entity types, entity instances, entity classes, attributes, values, domains, and relationships. So in our horse model, our entity type was horses. Each entity instance, that's each row that we see here, describes an actual horse, an individual horse that we're interested in. Our entity class, this higher order concept, might be something like animal. Attributes are the things that make up the entity type, so name, color, spot, sex, and weight. Here are all of our values, right, at the intersection of an individual instance and an attribute. Okay, so black is the value of color for this instance of a horse. Domain is the set of valid values for a particular attribute. And then relationship is when you have entities that are in a relationship with some other entity. And we're going to get more into that as class progresses.